Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So we will be analyzing Lingsha today in a new format that I hope you guys will like, the Anatomy of Gacha. And I've seen a lot of posts about Lingsha being underhyped and she's being skipped too much. And I'm going to give you guys my opinion and set you guys on the right expectations. Okay? So first, before we get into anything deep, let's look at what Lingsha actually does. Let's break down her stats. She is an attack-based healer. Similar to Luocha, she heals based on her attack. And this will be very important later because this means she doesn't sacrifice offensive stats to give you some defensive bonuses, which is very good. And her other main thing is that she converts break effect into attack and outgoing healing. So she doesn't really waste a lot of motion, and this does lean her to the archetype of using a lot of break effect teams. Now, we're going to get into the very interesting part of Lingsha, her multipliers. Now, her multipliers, if you look at it, is pretty low compared to other characters, but it is AoE, so 80% AoE. If you look at someone like Herta is 100% AoE, and she notoriously isn't that hard hitting in terms of single buttons. Even though her multipliers are lower, she can actually catch up in a very unique way that is being showcased a lot in YouTube. And I'm gonna go throw up a visual guide for you guys. Hold on. So here, this is your conventional Hypercarry team, for example. You have Jing Yuan doing most of the damage, and you have these two funneling some buffs. Now, the weakest link of this is Huohuo, but she's a very necessary link because this team will die without Huohuo in practically any scenario. Unless the team is doing so much DPS, then the thing is already dead, and even at that point, you don't need Huohuo at all. If you could actually help it, you do want your sustain to be removed because they're just contributing the least. Now, in Lingsha's case, if you make her the Hypercarry, you don't only have 2 slots to support her, you have a 3rd slot to do more damage to and support her. So even though she has less scalings than Herta, this does mean that she actually can catch up in her own way by just having 3 buffers or another damage dealer by her side, which is very unique. No other character can do that very well. And thanks to the combination of how many things she works in, she has a lot of teams. She has probably the most amount of teams in terms of what a sustain could actually help with. She could be used in a very meta team, Super Break, obviously. In follow-up attacks, she has her own. Fu Yuan can be a nice enough substitute than, let's say, Aventurine. In Jade teams, she is the only sustain that could practically be a debt collector, which is very cool. In Acheron teams, she can land a debuff on her ultimate, and if you have Lingsha's signature Light Cone which lands a debuff, then even better. She's probably one of the best Acheron drivers in terms of sustains. Right next to Gallagher, I believe, and Aventurine. That's pretty cool. And if you want to bank on something that isn't very sure yet, but I could see it being a very good possibility, is that the future summon meta, if it ever comes along, then Lingsha is the only character that can benefit from that as a sustain. Now let's start setting some expectations before I go into the main part of this video. Now, DPS Lingsha is, in theory, a lot better than it should be, but it's still very much a fringe strat that you kind of don't want to run as much as possible, because Lingsha is suffering from 2 very crippling things that put her in a very tough scenario. She has low multipliers and she doesn't have a lot of self buffs either. So you could live with one or the other, right? You could have high enough buffs and not enough scaling like Shui and Jingliu, and you could still survive even though it's not optimal. The best case scenario, you have high scaling but not a lot of self buffs, which means you scale well with more buffers. In Lingsha's case, she took the worst of both worlds and ended up being in a not desirable place. She doesn't scale well. She doesn't scale well because of her multipliers, and presently she even needs more help than ever. For now, even though DPS Lingsha seems good, it's a product of its time. I should say it's a thing that would probably be power corrupt in like 3 patches later or something. I don't see it being a very popular thing or something that you even want to run. It just a precaution there. And a lot of people have been saying that she's very SP negative, and it sort of comes from the Gallagher versus Lingsha comparison. And the thing is, Gallagher is completely SP positive. Nobody beats him at that. Even Luocha can't beat him at that. Lingsha is still SP positive, just not as much as Gallagher, but she's not like SP intensive to the point that it actually breaks her team comps. Like for example, Hoho. Hoho is very much an SP intensive healer, which doesn't bode well for her team synergies. Whereas Lingsha, it still kind of works. You could still put her in a Firefly team and the SP will be somewhat fine. So I feel like she's being underrated in that sort of aspect. She's definitely not a skill point eater, and it's definitely not an argument against her. It's just a praise for Gallagher, but not an argument to not pull Lingsha. That being said, I think we've gotten a good grasp of why people want to pull Lingsha, and let's give a brief summary here. She is just a very good character. She is very unique, and I feel like that uniqueness could give her a long way in the future meta. She's better than Gallagher in many aspects. In terms of general purpose, like as a defensive healer in general, she's just a lot better than Gallagher because she does provide a lot of constant AoE healing. She has a lot of cleansing, which does help her out actually in the SP positive thing. Because if Gallagher gets landed on with a very bad debuff, then he kind of has to cleanse it and spend a skill point, but Lingsha doesn't have to do it as much. She has a lot more teams, as I've elaborated. She works in very weirdly too as a DPS in some of them, and she does provide more damage than Gallagher. So there you go. She reminds me a lot like Zhao Cho, but the community is a lot kinder to her this time, which I'm very glad. She's at the surface not much of an upgrade, but in practice Lingsha will probably be better than Gallagher in many situations. She has more qualities of life, even though Gallagher isn't numerically far behind in the best team of Super Break, so that's nice. Let's get into the tough part. Why is Lingsha being skipped? Why are people not hyped for this character? It's something that I've already discussed before in why sustains don't sell well, and a lot of it I'm going to probably be walking back on. But basically, you only need a set amount of sustains, and unless they throw something like a new endgame mode requiring mono sustains, then you're probably better off just having 2 limited sustains and not pulling anymore. Because fact of the matter is, you only ever need 2 slots. Need in a very quotation marks, because even then, if you're a type of player that likes zero cycling and doesn't ever see the enemies actually do that much damage because you just kill them too fast, then you don't even need to sustain at all. So why pull Lingsha, right? Or any healer, actually, if you're a whale. And also why a lot of people do not want to pull for Lingsha, even though she's better than Gallagher in many aspects. She just has a bit too much for some people that they don't really want to pull her. Like, Super Break by itself is just so strong anyway that you probably don't see enough of Gallagher's weaknesses because the enemy is already broken and it's not hurting you in any way, and they're not crowd controlling you, so you don't actually see Gallagher's weaknesses come into play, which is very funny. I don't know why they did that, but she has a lot of overlap with Gallagher in terms of being a break effect healer and doing a lot of toughness damage. And the thing is, Gallagher was free on 2 selectors. And to add to that, Gallagher was in 2 of probably the most stacked banners in history with Acheron and Firefly. So you could probably imagine a lot of people have an E6 or very close to E6 Gallagher at this point if you're a veteran. And that doesn't really help Lingsha's case at all. And if we look more into her niche teams, there's a lot of pitfalls to it that I feel like people aren't looking far enough into. And in follow-up teams, she's fine for it, but they always prefer Aventurine anyway. So if you do have Aventurine, then you probably already have a sustain locked for that role. And you might as well just wait for an Aventurine rerun, I'll be honest with you. And with the Jade team in Pure Fiction, the weird part about Hypercarry Lingsha in Pure Fiction with Jade is that there's usually just a better depth collector around. Like, even if you use Lingsha, Jade, and 2 supports, you're actually much better off just bringing Herta or something and placing the depth collector on Herta. And it works out much better than putting it on Lingsha. So even though she has that sort of side role, and Herta is a free character by the way, then what the hell, man? You don't really need it, do you now? And the only team actually that's left is a summon meta. And the thing about the summon meta is that even I can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee to you that it will happen. The chance of losing the gamble by itself is already a big enough disadvantage, I feel like. But all that aside though, Lingsha, I feel like everybody should take away, is a very good character. She's generally one of the best designed, I feel like. She covers so many teams that I feel like it's a very good enough boost for your account to pull her. For a lot of people, it generally isn't, because they're already so far enough good into their account that they don't really need her. And obviously that, you know, varies from person to person, but I do hope that everyone had the right expectation walking away from this video. Anyway, I hope you guys like this. Comment down below, do all the algorithm stuff, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.